Papua New Guinea is the largest country in the Pacific region. A country of 8 million people, it is one of the most culturally diverse and least explored countries in the world. More than 80% of the population live in rural areas. Majority are subsistence farmers and live in traditional social groups or clans. Strong economic growth in the mining and petroleum sector within the last 20 years has delivered significant changes to PNG's main urban areas and to communities benefiting directly from foreign investment. Despite strong economic growth, the country still faces significant challenges in meeting its sustainable development goals. The rapidly changing climate patterns and population growth may affect nature to respond to such change. The need for climate action is now.
Climate change is real, and climate change poses far greater challenges to us than what we currently experience through the socioeconomic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Those impacts are also real, and they are very tough on many people, especially on the poor and vulnerable. But the impact of climate change, its impact on food systems, on ecosystems, can be far greater what we're currently experiencing. That's why it's so important that we all join hands now and that every country, every nation does its very best on achieving the Paris climate targets that will be essential for the survival of humankind.
Climate change is one of the greatest issues that Papua New Guinea's national development is facing. Weather patterns are changing all the time. Papua New Guinea has already experienced extreme weather and climate events such as those brought about by El Nino in 1997 and 98 of the Highlands region, where close to 500,000 people were affected. While the effects of climate change won't be the same across all of PNG, each region will face impacts on their infrastructure, health and food supply. The sudden changes in temperature and weather pattern are greatly affecting the livelihood of the people. Papua New Guinea has one of the most significant, largely intact tropical forests in the world. PNG's forest covers 80% of the country's land area and 60% of the forest are undisturbed. Nevertheless, the forest is coming under increasing pressure from logging, agriculture, commercial and small scale, and mining. Forests in PNG are largely under customary ownership and play an important role in sustaining the traditional subsistence livelihoods for most of the population. Taking urgent action on climate change requires a collaborative effort by all stakeholders, from affected communities, the government, civil society organizations, the private sector, and development partners. All these challenges are well captured in Papua New Guinea's Sustainable Development Goal 13 Climate Response Roadmap 2020 to 2030, launched by the government recently. In 2015, Papua New Guinea, amongst 196 countries, became a signatory to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change's Paris Agreement. Under the Paris Agreement, each country must determine, plan and report every 5 years on the contributions implemented to mitigate global warming. This is known as the Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs. NDCs are a list of actions that a country intends to pursue to achieve, adapt and mitigate against the impacts of climate change.
In 2016, Papua New Guinea was one of the first countries in the world that submitted its nationally determined contributions. That highlighted our commitment and urgency by our government to address climate change.
Despite the current global challenges related to COVID, Papua New Guinea, through the Climate Change and Development Authority, the mandated authority responsible for coordination of climate change initiatives for the government, and acting as the focal point to the UNFCCC, has remained committed to revising and submitting its NDC in 2020. The enhanced NDC has gone through a series of lockdown sessions and a rigorous consultation process with all key sectors and development partners. With collaboration from stakeholders and development partners, PNG has developed achievable mitigation and adaptation action targets to be delivered with the implementation plan. This implementation plan outlines the activities that will be undertaken to achieve the emission reduction targets in the energy sector, agriculture, forest and other land use sector known as AFLU, and adaptation listed in PNG's enhanced NDC. In energy, PNG will work towards a carbon-neutral energy industry subsector by 2030 through increased share of renewables from 30% in 2015 to 78% by 2030, reducing energy demand through energy efficiency, fossil fuel offsetting from the energy industry subsector through nature-based solutions, establishment of framework for data collection to support policy and regulation for emission management. On AFLU, aims by 2030, PNG is committing to a reduction in annual emission from deforestation and forest degradation due to agriculture expansion and commercial logging of 10,000 gigagram of carbon dioxide equivalent compared to 2015 level. This target will be achieved by a 25% reduction in both the area of annual deforestation and annual degradation against 2015 levels, equating to a reduction in annual deforestation of 8,300 hectares or annual degradation of 43,300 hectares, as well as an increase in the area of forest planted. On adaptation targets, PNG will focus on 4 development sectors central to PNG's ability to adapt to climate change, namely agriculture, health, infrastructure and transport. These targets include 100% of PNG's population to benefit from introduced health measures to respond to malaria and other climate-sensitive diseases. 6 million people, which is 70% of the population, benefit from improved early warning information to respond to climate extremes. 10% of the total population, 0.8 million beneficiaries, 25% that are women, have increased resilience of food and water security, health and well-being in PNG, and $1.7 billion value of transport, building and utility infrastructure and assets is built and or rehabilitated according to climate resilient codes and standards. Papua New Guinea, as the big brother in the Pacific region, is yet again ready to lead the region in submitting an ambitious NDC by 2020.
As Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, I have the pleasure to announce that Papua New Guinea has successfully submitted its nationally determined contributions to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This shows the government's commitment as a global citizen to combat climate change. I am pleased that PNG's NDC is accompanied by its implementation plan, which details activities that PNG will be implementing to achieve our targets set in the NDC.
PNG's enhanced NDC submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is the country's portfolio of actions that will deliver positive changes through sustainable development. Leading up to COP26, the government of Papua New Guinea will prioritise the need for support for the implementation of the NDC from 2020 to 2030.
When submitting PNG's NDC, PNG also developed its NDC implementation plan. The implementation plan is to provide a more detailed outline of how targets will be achieved, and it will be against this work plan that the annual progress will be monitored. PNG's NDC implementation plan also lays out key programs that will be supported to ensure targets are met in the energy sector, the AFLU sector and the adaptation sector.
regulating the use of PNG's environment for the benefit of the future of the country that is both economically viable and environmentally sustainable, while ensuring the aspects of conservation and preservation are being appreciated. Papua New Guinea and its people will always be at the forefront to address devastating impacts of climate change, to build resilient communities and sustainable development.